Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey, everybody, it's Jared. Welcome to another episode of All Things Crime. Super excited that you're here and appreciate it. While we're here, please hit that subscribe button and, share this episode. Our guest today is a gentleman named Branden Morgan. He is a podcaster himself, has an amazing podcast called The Devil Within. We're going to get into that a little bit and just kind of his background, how things get started. It's always interesting. If you've ever been to some of these big crime shows like CrimeCon, those are always just amazing as far as the number of people that are interested in true crime. There's a reason that shows like CSI took off. What was that in the Branden in the 90s?
Early 2000s CSI.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of when the.
Oh gosh, no, you might be right, man. It might have been like 99.
Yeah. Well, by the way, welcome to the show, Branden.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me, Jared. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So let's get right into it, man. Let's talk about you and your podcast. So first of all, how did you get started with The Devil Within? And tell us a little bit about yourself and what your background is.
Yeah, well, completely by accident, I got into podcasting. I grew up in New Jersey. I left home pretty young, come out west. I was an actor and a writer for a really long time. And in 2017, I sold a television show to Sony TV, and figured that was it for me. Awesome. I'm on the lot. I'm not leaving. That's my career forever. Right. But as you know, a lot of times there are people that make decisions about your life that you don't even know exist. And some higher ups decided that they could struggle along without my contributions to the network. So I left there in 2018. And then I was just, a 45-year-old guy with no college degree, 2 kids and a mortgage who needed a job. And my agent submitted this quirky little horror script that I had to a media startup. The story was about a murder, a true story that had happened in my hometown when I was a kid by a kid my age down the block from me. That never really sat well with me. So I used writing about it kind of as therapy, to be honest, and I had been through many different iterations of the script. And so this media startup gets the script. They like it. I figure they want to develop it as a television show. The meeting happens and they tell me they want to do it as a podcast. They're getting into podcasting. Would I be interested? I went, sure. And then I had to go figure out what a podcast was and kind of how to do it, right? Because I'd never done it. So I write this out as ostensibly as a true crime podcast, but I didn't know the rules. I wasn't really involved in podcasting, so it angered a few people in the podcasting community because, not on purpose, but I feel like I kind of tricked people a little bit. The first few episodes lay out as a true crime podcast, as an investigative kind of journey. But then the second half of the series, I just kind of became a horror writer again and turned it into a fictionalized origin story for the Jersey Devil. So while I angered a lot of people in the community, it also opened the door to a lot of different listeners from different genres. So I got the paranormal, I got the supernatural listeners, I got the horror listeners. So just through dumb luck, the show wound up being really successful and really popular. And so now all of a sudden I'm a true crime podcaster. And I wound up learning the industry and really falling in love with it. And I love the creativity of it and the just kind of the vastness of the content that's available to write and to podcast about. So that's kind of how I wound up there. Now I'm a couple hundred episodes in. I don't think I've hit 200 yet, actually, but 4 seasons and about 100 weekly episodes, and I love it.
Yeah. Well, you're describing your season 1 of The Devil Within, right? With
Yeah.
that first victim and
Yeah.
suspect that lived in your area.
Yeah, that was a really weird time. It just in our country. In I don't know if the satanic panic was worldwide, but I know that there was just a lot going on. Right, there was a lot going on. A
Yeah.
lot of it wound up being fluff and being a lot of bluster, and a lot of those cases were thrown out. But I think the harm done by the overblown nature of the satanic panic was that it kind of lessened the impact of actual cases, like what happened in my town. This 14-year-old
Yeah.
kid murders his mom
Yeah.
with a Boy Scout knife, then kills himself in the woods, and he was fully a disciple of whatever Satan meant to him. He was a Catholic school kid, right? But he had written out a contract between himself and the devil. I'm going to destroy goodness wherever I can. I'm going to kill my family in your name, and all that. So it was legitimate. This kid was seduced by something, and everybody missed it. You know, he was an all area wrestler. He was a great 106-pound wrestler. He was a straight A student, was an altar boy. And all of those people, the coaches, the clergy, parents, everybody missed what was an obvious, or should have been obvious, emotional break that this kid was going through. And then, the worst case scenario unfolded.
Well, how long was this happening while he was supposedly normal, but he was actually, writing out this contract?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and that's part of the mystery of it, because so Thanksgiving of 1987, he was his normal self. Okay, and then it was January 9th of 88, so barely 6 weeks later, that the murder happened. So it was in those 6 weeks where he went through such a dramatic change. He was became a different person. Maybe because of how quickly it happened, people missed it. But I think to your question was, there wasn't a lot of there weren't a lot of signs leading up to, at least to Thanksgiving, right? And they attribute it to an assignment that he was given in school, religions of the world class, where everyone in class had to write an essay on a different religion, something that's not Catholicism, to kind of open these kids' eyes that there's a larger world beyond small town New Jersey, where everybody's Irish Catholic or Italian Catholic, right? But Tommy didn't get the satanic assignment. It was a kid that sat next to him that was assigned to do a paper on Satanism. But they were friends. They were on the wrestling team, but that's where Tommy was introduced to it, was through this school assignment that a friend of his had, and it just, man, something about it just really attracted this young, impressionable kid. Maybe it was rebellion. Maybe it was, he was obviously under a lot of pressure, and, the Catholic Church swooped in afterwards and said, yo, this was clear-cut case of demonic possession that we missed. Sorry. Nothing to see here. So the cops in my small town went, okay, that sounds good. Case closed. See you later. And there was never really any resolution about it. So that was season 1. And again,
just really quick though, before we move on from that, I'm trying to understand. He killed his mother.
Yeah.
Or were there multiple victims?
Himself, his mother, and himself.
Okay.
Yep. So, so he killed his mom with a Boy Scout knife. Then he tried to steal his dad's car. It was snowing like hell that night, right? So he doesn't know how to drive. He's 14. He gets in the car, floors it, and just crashes into a snowbank across the street from his house. So the car's so then he gets out of the car and he runs. And now snow falling, tracks are getting covered. Cops can't find him anywhere. They don't find him till the next morning. And he had gotten as far as across the street from his house, sitting in the woods, where he had a vantage point where he could watch what was happening at his house, because he tried to set the house on fire. So he wanted to see if the house burned down and killed his dad and his brother, but it didn't. The fire department put the fire out. So then he took the same knife, and this is the most incredible part of the case that no one can agree on, right? From paramedics to coroners to medical examiners, everybody. So the first thing, he took the knife and he tried to cut his wrist. The blade went between the two bones of his arm and just kind of severed every tendon and muscle. So his left hand was useless. Then, allegedly, he took the knife and went under his left ear and then dragged the blade all the way across to his right ear, severing his spinal column, dude. Basically cutting his own head off, okay? At 14 and 106 pounds, okay? Everybody who saw the body, all the medical professionals said, okay, this is a murder victim. Someone did this to him. But forensically, this is up your alley, there was no evidence anywhere. It was a fresh blanket of snow. There were no other steps to it. There was no hair or blood or any other kind of trace evidence or anything at all that would let investigators know that there was someone else there. So officially it went down as a suicide, but reading the medical reports, people are like, there's no way that he did this to himself. So that's the big question of the case. Me as a fiction writer, that was enough of a crack in the door to open up all of this other fun kind of stuff that I wrote about. But speaking technically, no one really knows how it happened. So that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's quite the self-inflicted wound. And go that far.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. I mean, is it even, I mean, there were people that wanted to try to recreate it. Like, how far could you go before like you lose your strength from blood loss, right? Like, could you even finish it? And I know it's a macabre and weird to discuss, maybe not for a forensic guy like you, but for me, it's really unsettling and to think about it just from an emotional standpoint. Like, he was my age. We grew up in the same town under the same rules, same friends, same everything, right? And I couldn't conceive of a world where I would do that to my mother and to myself. And neither could any of my friends, So it took a long time for me to kind of find a place to put it. And that's where it ended up. It wound up in a pseudo true crime podcast.
Well, that's, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this right now that are like going, I'm bailing on this, man. I'm going to go listen to that episode of The Devil With
Right. Well, if they want to wait until October, it's going to be a 4-part documentary on, and I sound like such a tool saying what I'm about to say, but on a major streamer. I'm not allowed to say which one yet because whatever. But anyway, well, you won't be able to miss it. I'll say.
That's I mean, congratulations on that.
Yeah.
I know that's always the goal for every writer and everybody that's that does this for a living. It's like everybody wants to be the creator of the next Yellowstone.
Dream come true. You're 100% right. It's shooting right now back east. So I'm over the moon about it.
Congratulations. That's fantastic.
Thank you. So
well, that's those kind of interesting, and reading your profile, especially being MySpace is obviously almost opposite of where you're at. So, with you being in, writing about the horror of it and being able to articulate that, whereas I'm kind of more on the physical evidence side of things. And so, it's more of a, it's either like DNA, for example, it's either there or it's not. And, there's really very limited amounts of in between, all science is based on, kind of hard facts where, it's not, there's very limited amounts of interpretation that you can skew it one way or another. Whereas, once you get onto the your side, now you're talking about, what motivates people? What, where does this kind of evil come from kind of thing? And in fact, every time we start talking about this, there's a particular, he's like a forensics or a criminal psychologist that is a good friend of mine, and his name's Dr. Lee Meller. He is he's the kind of guy that you would write a lot of your episodes, the stuff that he investigates. And when his kind of his mantra when he's teaching classes and stuff is he's talking to the detectives, and he'll be like, look, when you're staring at a crime scene that's got a mutilated body in it, and the blood everywhere, and you're just like, there's blood in 14 rooms, just everywhere. You're like, where did all this blood come from? It's not, the victim's here, and yet there's blood over there. There's blood over there. Anyway, it's just the weird kind of stuff. He said, when you don't really understand what you're looking at, that's when you call me.
Yeah.
And his explanation of even like why cops go in, have so much PTSD, and he calls it, it's so fascinating, once you get into the psychology of crime. And he said, there's an intersecting horizontal line and a vertical line. So imagine, this line that's kind of like this. And he says on the horizontal line, it's what he calls the sewer. And the sewer is like all the blood and the guts and, the filth that you'll go into some of these crime scenes, and you'll look at some of these people. It's like, how do you live like this? This place there's rats, living with you, and, it's just needles and, just the gross part of humanity that most people just can't comprehend. Then he said, intersecting with that line is what he calls the abyss. And the abyss is the why behind whatever crime you're looking at. So, you think about your 14-year-old that murders his mom. It's like, what is that abyss? What is that reason that he did that? And he said the people that aren't trained to understand that's where the real complexity. And he said where cops get in trouble is sometimes they go down the abyss. They're involved with the sewer. They see that every day. But then there's times that they'll see a crime, and they'll be like, what is the motive behind this? Why did this 14-year-old kid kill his mom? Of all the people that you would think he would love, it would be his mother. But sometimes there is no why. And that's the problem. If you go down the abyss and you go down too far trying to understand the why, and if there is no why, then you can just keep going down that forever. And that's where psychologically we just can't handle it. And that's kind of one of the things that I'll bet you explore in a major way. And, maybe you're not even aware that you're doing it, but I'll bet you reside based on being a writer and, in your podcast. I'll bet that's where you hang out a lot.
The abyss is a dark place, man. It is. Trying to understand, human motivation for evil is, it's fascinating. It really is, and I have two young kids, and one of the biggest impacts that the work has had on me is how nervous I am at night when everybody's asleep, making sure every door's locked, making sure the alarm system's on, to the point where it's so funny. I created these very simple gravity powered like alarm systems. Like if anyone tries to open a window in either of my kids' room, like no matter what, this loud thing is going to fall and wake everybody up, just in case they're able to pick locks and turn off the alarm system. Good old gravity is going to come in and save the day. And I can't close my eyes unless I know everything is in place. It's weird because I've covered enough cases where it's like I did an episode yesterday where, and I love, from a creative point of view, backing up to like the catalyst of like where it all began, where none of this other shit would have happened if this hadn't happened. Okay. And I backed this one story all the way up to, it was a 4th of July afternoon, and the family was outside in the yard barbecuing, and the daughter was inside in the air conditioning talking to her boyfriend, and a phone call came in for the dad. So she opened up her bedroom window. Dad, you got a phone call. And for whatever reason, just didn't close it. Didn't close the window. Normal. Maybe it happened a million times in her life. But that night, the bad guy saw the open window from the street. It was a crime of opportunity. And then awful, awful things happened. So, so what is it? If that phone call hadn't come in, if she had realized, maybe close the window, all of that. So it's small things that have made me hyper vigilant and hyper aware that there is evil in the world, and that it don't ever have the opinion that, oh, that happens to other people. It could never happen to me, because it could. Yeah, because it totally could.
Yeah.
But I'm intrigued by forensics. I'm super intrigued, especially you mentioned DNA, and now there's this waterfall of justice happening with investigative genetic genealogy that I'm so torn about. I love that it's happening, but then I'm also, a Fourth Amendment guy, right? Like, if I didn't let this company know that when I want to figure out what my ancestry is like, that it's also going to be opened up to law enforcement to try and create a profile, like that seems a little bit of an intrusion. But it's a net gain. We're catching bad guys. And I think ultimately it's a really powerful investigative tool. I'd love to know your thoughts on that. Sorry, I know it's your show and I'm interviewing you now, but
no,
there's so much I want to know about you. Yeah. Yeah.
It's forensics FIG is what it's called, the Forensics Investigative Genetic Genealogy.
FIGG?
FIGG, yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes it's just IGG.
Yeah.
Genetic genealogy is kind of the next phase of DNA. And when you look at the actual DNA level, it uses a different part than what the typical STR profile, which is what they can use in court. That's the DNA you're going to get when you take like a buccal swab and then they find physical DNA off of the evidence, the murder weapon or the victim's clothing or something like that. So there's a part on the DNA strand called STR, short tandem repeat. And then there's another part of the DNA profile that's called I'm not sure the actual clinical name. It's not clinical, but the scientific name, but they call it a SNP. And the SNP is where you get your genetic genealogy from. And that's where like 23andMe and ancestry.com.
Right.
Yeah. When they first got into that, where they can tell what your ancestry is and your gender and all that kind of stuff. And so that, those databases, the main ones where it's specifically meant for genealogy, Ancestry, 23andMe, when the Golden State Killer, when they first used the genetic genealogy to capture the Golden State Killer, I don't think those databases and those companies understood kind of what was happening.
Right.
And since then, they've essentially closed those off. So cops can't use those anymore. So
right.
Definitely if you're interested in your genealogy, then go use ancestry.com.
Yes.
Because those are safe. Now
there are a couple other ones that say, hey, we also allow law enforcement to poke around.
when you, I think even Ancestry and 23andMe, but well, even if they don't, you can go to others and you can specifically mark a box and say, can this be used to for a database that can be searched by law enforcement? I don't know what the exact verbiage is, but it's something like that. And like GEDmatch, I think, is the big one.
Yeah.
And that one, there's a couple of companies that I'm really familiar with and I work with all the time that use GEDmatch as the database. And it's, I don't know, there's several million people that have voluntarily entered their DNA into GEDmatch. And so, yeah, once you get a profile, so the key is if you have DNA from evidence, but you don't have DNA from an actual suspect to compare it to,
Right.
you have to have both. And you have to have a reference sample, which is the one where you take like a buccal swab of your mouth.
Yep.
That's what's called a reference sample. And the other one is the DNA from the evidence and from the crime scene. Well, you have to have both in order to create compare the profiles. Well, if you don't, then you can enter that DNA from the crime scene, which is what they had with the Golden State Killer.
Yeah.
They had the guy's DNA from the many crimes that he committed, but so that's how they knew he was a serial killer and how he had progressed from rapes and all that kind of stuff. But they didn't. They had like 1,000 suspects, which it's impossible to narrow that down to. And so,
absolutely.
But by using the genetics and the genealogy of it, they were able to narrow it down to like six suspects.
Right.
And
and then they can go try and get like surreptitious samples, right? They can like track them and like he throws out a cup or a cigarette butt or something. And
So ultimately they want to narrow it down using genetic genealogy. They narrow it down to a family line. Sometimes they can get it like some of these genetics experts, man, they can get it down to the actual person. Amazing. They said, no, this is the guy you're looking for.
I've covered cases because there's another show that I do that is much more just true crime forensic. Here we go. It's called Criminal Mischief, and my partner on it, she's a journalist from Seattle, and we've covered cases where the lab comes back and says, okay, this is who you're looking for, right? We have the entire profile. It's here. Sometimes they can even give you a sketch of what they might look like.
Yeah.
Based on, and that blows my mind. That's got to be.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's like a sea change in terms of forensics.
Yeah,
and my opinion, my lay opinion, is that it's going to revolutionize.
It is. It absolutely is. There's
in ways that we don't really understand yet.
Yeah, there's cases being solved all over the country and all over the world, really. And
it's been privatized to a point. And there was one case where, and this was going back maybe 5 or 6 years, where it was a college somewhere back east where they were teaching it, right? They're teaching genetic genealogy in their like criminal justice kind of suite of classes. And, and the investigators were from a small Midwest town that didn't have the money to do it all. And they're like, no. We'll pay for it. We are a well-funded private school. We'll pay for all of the genetic stuff and we'll just give you like the results. And they're like, yeah, okay. And they solved it. And the professor then left and started her own kind of thing. And so I think it's going to be moving to the private sector, right? That's going to be super well-funded and it's just, and I think you're going to start seeing all of these dominoes start falling with these cases being solved, which is amazing.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of private people that can come in. They can look at the profiles that the police may have obtained. And then, there's even algorithms being written, where they can plug the profile in and it'll connect to the databases and, it'll crank it out. But
what do you think about, let me ask you a question, because I was asked this before. So, because in a lot of the cases that I've gone over, and really just as the side person, like Carolyn, my partner, she's the brains of the outfit. But a lot of times the way it works is we don't have DNA of the bad guy. We don't have the reference sample that you're talking about. Okay. But we through the IgG process, we know who the family is. We have, an idea. Because a relative of this guy checked out their ancestry and they're in the database. Okay. So they go to the family and they say, hey, will you give us a sample? And they're honest with it. They're like, we think a blood relative of yours is a serial killer. Will you help us catch them? Right? By giving us a DNA sample to kind of narrow it down. And that's a weird question for me. Like, if law enforcement knocked on my door and they said, someone in your family we think is right for these murders and we need your help. It's family. I don't know if I would help, would you do that?
Would I do it?
Maybe it's like the Jersey mafia in me. They're like, hey, keep your mouth shut. Like, but I don't know if I would help get a blood relative brought up on murder charges.
I don't know. It depends on how well you liked them, I guess. No, yeah. You know what though? By the time they get to that level, if they understand and this is something that I think everybody really needs to understand is, even a DNA profile is just one cog in the wheel.
Yeah.
You're not going to get convicted just based on a DNA profile.
Right.
There has to be so many other pieces of evidence that's going to tie you to the crime, because your DNA can be there. And believe it or not, DNA can survive for a long time.
Yeah.
And so, if your DNA is at a crime scene, whether it be a storefront or somebody's house, it doesn't really matter. Your DNA there just places you there at some point in time.
Right.
Well, from there, they have to look at, okay, well, where was he the night that the crime was committed? Where, what, and I'm assuming it's a he because most of the time it is, but, what does the cell phone data say? What does eyewitnesses say? Those are all just pieces of the puzzle that they have to put together. Yeah, you're never going to get convicted based on one specific thing. Some evidence is more powerful than others, but it's always going to just be a part of the story. It's not going to be the entire story. So, the risk that you say, and I'm a big Fourth Amendment guy too.
Yeah.
But they can obtain it so many other ways that, to me, it's kind of like, do I really want to be, inhibiting or slowing down this investigation?
And I think at the end of the day, I'd be like, all right, my cousin's a murderer. He's a murderer and he deserves what he gets. I'd probably do the right thing, but there would be some pause for me,
Oh yeah. No, I think 99% of people would be like, well, I don't know about that.
Yeah. Okay.
If they're sitting there and they're at your doorstep and they've said, we think like your first cousin is, a murderer, they don't need your DNA, but at that point.
Right. And if my first cousin, they're probably right. No.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but by then they can basically use some of these other pieces of evidence that they have to narrow it down, get a warrant, and then they can just follow the guy and eventually, like you said, get a cigarette butt or something. Yep. They'll get a glass, like I've got my little glass here of water, and they can get, anything that even has a fingerprint on it. You can typically scrape enough DNA off of that to develop a good You only need 10 cells.
Jeez.
And if you think about, we typically we'll slough off 400,000 cells a day between everything that we touch. We shower in the morning. When you're talking, you're putting DNA on everything within a couple of feet just by talking. So your DNA is everywhere, and it's pretty easy to get. I shouldn't say easy. Well, getting DNA, especially with our system, like the MVAC, we can collect DNA, just massive amounts of it. The question though is, can you get good DNA, viable DNA? Because if it's like, you're in a hotel room
Sure. Oh, exactly. That was going to be my question. Has
Yeah.
and I think the answer is yes, but has your device like made it through like courtroom like scrutiny? Like, has it been like accepted as evidence in trials?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's even gone through
super impressive, man.
it's gone through the appellate process. So
Wow.
it's, yeah, it's our system of collecting DNA, has been accepted. I don't know how many of the 50 states, but yeah, it's widely accepted.
Do you have competition out there? Are there other devices like yours, or
No, not really.
that's
There's,
man?
there's some that try to fake it, but,
Yeah,
as far as being an actual commercialized,
yeah.
consistent, it's going to work the same way pretty much every time.
So
Yeah.
my question about it is like, what makes it unique? Is it where once it gets sucked up, is it where it gets captured that makes it like sterile, or that makes it like that protects it from being corrupted, or
Yeah. Well, it's a two-step process. So initially, the MVAC is spraying a solution down and vacuuming it up, and it's
okay.
originally collected in a bottle, and then we concentrate it on a filter. So it gets rid of all the liquid, and then just the DNA is on the filter, and that's what the lab actually processes. But everything that would touch DNA or have DNA in it, like, the tubing, the stuff like that would have the DNA in it, it's a one-time use.
Oh,
So,
really?
so you're never carrying DNA from like one piece of evidence to the next one, because you're with each new piece of evidence, let alone a new crime scene or something like that,
Sure.
you're getting a new sterile MVAC. So
Wow.
yeah, I
Well,
hope
there's
that
a
makes
game I
sense.
want to play. I want to play a game if you're up for it. I want to give you a current case because I'd love to know like a quick 2 minutes rapid fire on
Okay.
stuff that's in the news. Okay. Gilgo Beach. Go.
Wait, say that again?
The Gilgo Beach murderer, the alleged that big mountain of a guy in New York and on Long Island, where who was recently arrested.
Oh, the Long Island serial killer.
The Long Island serial killer.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you think?
Well, everything he touched, including wrapping up the women in burlap,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. You bet. We can.
So you think he's good for it?
Well, if he touched it, and so here's the deal: DNA breaks down with humidity and with heat. Sunlight breaks it down faster. So a lot of it's going to depend on how long the victim was there before they found her. If the victim was out in the elements for a long time, there's a much higher chance that the DNA is not going to be, really be able to isolate it, his DNA versus hers. Now there are ways of, if you look specifically at the Y chromosome of the suspect, it's called a YSTR profile, then, you can get rid of a lot of the victim DNA and just focused on the suspect. If it's a male on female,
right?
if it's a male on male, then you can't do that because both of them have Y chromosomes. But if the victim's a female and the suspect's a male, then a lot of times they can use that YSTR and it isolates. So, especially if the victim is, say it's been a couple of weeks or even months, the victim's DNA, the body's skeletonized even, after, say it's 3 to 6 months, something like that.
Yeah.
Her clothing, she decomposed in her clothing, then it's really hard, but you can focus on a YSTR if you do that. And then it gets rid of all of the victim DNA and focuses only on the male suspect. So lots of different ways that investigators can focus. But as far as the Long Island serial killer, if he physically handled those victims and they got to the victims' bodies before the decomposition got too bad, then absolutely you can collect all sorts of DNA from that.
All right. What about what's going on in Idaho? It's about to go to trial with the Kohlberger case with those 4 students.
Yeah.
I'd love your opinion on that, because there's that, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but there's that additional blood sample like on the railing that they're not looking at because they got a DNA sample off like the sheath of a knife. And
well, they got his DNA from one of the snaps, I think.
Exactly. Yes.
Of the sheath. Yeah.
Yeah.
The one that as far as the MVAC goes, by the way, my whole family went to University of Idaho.
Oh, oof.
I mean, my dad was there. I lived in Moscow, Idaho for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
When I was younger. Yeah. My dad graduated from University of Idaho, and then where Kohlberger was going to school at Washington State, that's where my dad got his PhD. So intimately familiar with that area.
Yeah.
In fact, when this whole thing first happened, I sent the chief of police up there an email saying, "Hey, if you think the MVAC would help this investigation, man, I'll load it up and I'll be up there tomorrow."
Wow.
Fortunately, I think they were able to capture him, and I think they had their sights set on him so fast that, between cell phone data and things like that, they didn't need it. But and I'm pretty sure they used swabbing for that snap. They were able to get enough of his DNA from that snap that because it's got snaps, they kind of have sharp edges. So if he ran his thumb across that at any point, it wouldn't be hard to get good DNA from there. And my understanding now is they got his DNA off of one of the victim's fingernails.
Oh, wow. I didn't hear
that.
So
yeah, that's like a recent development, my understanding. And that, so, which kudos to her. She fought back. She was probably in the midst of getting murdered, being stabbed, and she fought back. So, it's kind of like Lake and Riley.
Yeah.
They have her, her heartbeat on her smartwatch. That she fought that guy for 18 minutes. And if you think about fighting for your life for 18 minutes, that's a long time. So, she, oh
my gosh.
Anyway, she literally was fighting for her life and fighting for her virtue. And she was not going to let him rape her. So a lot of these victims, they put up a fight to the end, which is absolutely what they should do.
100%, of course.
Yeah.
That's the sewer. That's the sewer, right? But now let's get to the abyss, especially with Kohlberger, right? Then it's like, what is wrong with this dude? Let's say allegedly he's the guy.
Yeah.
Right. 4 people, 4 young people. I don't.
Yeah, that's a weird one. What is his reasoning behind it? They say he sent her Instagram DMs and things that that they found that she obviously never replied to, and
So he's a jilted lover, maybe, and not even. He's like, oh, she didn't like me, I'm going to go murder the whole house.
I guess.
I know. I mean, that's just outside of my comprehension. But all right, moving on. Ready? Luigi Mangione, the CEO killer. They got this kid.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He obviously did it. This is another sewer abyss kind of question. So is his motivation is just like the healthcare system is crooked and I'm going to deliver the people from this, like I'm going to martyr this guy. Like I guess that's his motivation.
Man, you're asking questions that are so far out of my lane. I'm just like, tough to answer them, but Honestly, that guy, I think some of it was, um, I think he's so narcissistic that
Yes.
he actually believes that killing this other individual is going to actually make a difference, but that he's going to be put on a pedestal like he's the savior that's going to save the rest of society from the big bad insurance companies. I don't know. I mean I
That's such an astute observation, Jared, and I completely agree with you. And while I have struggled with the healthcare system in America personally, okay, fine. Uh, all I see in this was a dad, a father of two, who
yeah.
gets murdered by some coward shot in the back on the streets of New York.
Oh, it's the
You know?
ultimate form of cowardice. It's
Okay.
I mean, to not even call out his name and have him
Nothing.
turn around and look at you so you can shoot him in the front. I mean, to shoot him in the back. Yeah, that's you even go back to the old westerns. It's like, you coward.
Give you a chance to draw. He'll give you a
Yeah,
chance,
you
right?
can't even be man enough to look him in the eye before you shoot him. But yeah,
I don't like that. I don't like it at all. It's
no,
despicable and cowardly. And
I think there's so many people like him in society. I think there's very few that'll actually ever act on it, but the
right,
ones that are, um, they just live in this fantasy land that they think that, number one, they're way more important than they actually are.
yeah,
But you go back to Brian Koberger and you think, um, this guy actually thought that this, pretty girl that, was part of a sorority or whatever, that, she's probably pretty self-absorbed, really popular on Instagram and whatever.
yeah,
But she's just living her life. She's just in college. She's like carefree and just having a good time. And, she probably never even looked at her DMs. They're so packed full of
right.
people. And so for some reason he thinks that, why is she ignoring me? Well,
More narcissism.
she's not ignoring you, idiot. She's ignoring
Yeah,
everybody.
everybody, because you're not her boyfriend, or you're
Yeah.
just not on her radar screen,
Yeah.
because she's a college kid.
She's got her little inner circle and that's all she's
Oh,
looking at. I mean, I've got teenagers.
yeah,
Their thought process beyond the next 5 minutes is
doesn't
so far.
exist. doesn't
Yes.
doesn't exist. Who's at
Yeah.
Starbucks right now that I could go hang out with? Like, that's the extent of their forethought. That's it. I
Yeah.
know. I'm in that world as well. So it's
Oh
brutal. But
yeah.
I want to circle back forensically. If again, I'm sorry, I'm interviewing you on your own show,
No, bring it
but
on, man. It's
because
all
you
about it.
mentioned that humidity breaks down DNA, right?
All right. Say
You
that
said
again.
you said something earlier about humidity breaking down DNA being bad for DNA.
Right.
Okay, so what is how does cold affect DNA? Is it preserve it?
Yeah. It
Is
preserves it.
So what could they have done differently back in the winter of '88 with Tommy Sullivan, with his 14-year-old who basically cut his own head off with a Boy Scout knife at that murder scene where there's blood on the snow and his body there? Um, what could they have done given that late '80s technology to see if there was another person there that maybe did it?
Well, in the 80s, DNA wasn't really even. Yeah.
No.
I think the first, the first crime that was ever actually investigated was in the late 80s. But back then you had to have, like a blood spot the size of a silver dollar in
Right.
order just to tell kind of what the blood type was.
So then what were they using in the 80s? Was it just like hair samples, fingerprints, footprints,
Yeah.
yeah?
I don't even think, I mean, trace evidence was, they were looking at fibers. They're looking
Oh,
at,
right.
hair, they can identify kind of what kind of hair it is, but pretty limited on that. But fingerprinting, I think, was by far the most prolific as far as evidence. But had they preserved all of his clothing and
Right.
um, then maybe they could look at it now with modern technology. Certainly the MVAC would be because most of the time in the cases that I've seen, it is really, really hard to actually, cut somebody's throat to that level without physically grabbing onto them. And
to like secure them, to steady.
Yeah.
It. Yeah.
Especially, that particular case is a little bit different because, it's more of a slice.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe they'd grab the hair, but stabbings, especially, people don't realize how difficult it is to actually stab somebody multiple times. And, even going to the Brian Kober case, that guy.
Yeah. Or like the O.J. Simpson case, whatever.
Yeah. To stab victims that many times, oh, geez. It's not only physically exhausting, but that's why victim blood is pretty common at crime scenes of these big stabbings, because as they're stabbing, the knife gets slippery. And a lot of times when they're stabbing, the knife their hand will go down the knife and actually they'll cut their own hands.
Oh, wow.
Because as you're stabbing, it's difficult to grip that knife once it's bloody and it gets slippery. So,
Jesus.
Gripping that kind of knife is, they're going to stab themselves. But if you're stabbing somebody, I'm sure the adrenaline's flowing. I doubt they'd even feel it till much later.
Well, I'm about halfway through season 4 of my show right now.
Yeah.
And I'm doing an expose on Richard Ramirez, on the Night Stalker.
Okay.
And a big part, until the governor of California, Feinstein, or was she only the mayor of San Francisco back then? I forget which. Until she ruined it by acknowledging what their evidence was, it was all sneaker prints. They had a bloody sneaker print from almost every crime scene of this guy. Okay. So, and I had never heard of sneaker prints being so valuable in crime scenes. And then I learned that it's one of the most common bits of evidence that's collected are sneaker prints. Yeah. I just learned that myself. And I found that really, really kind of interesting. And that if the person happens to be barefoot, a footprint can be as identifiable as a fingerprint.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Everybody's footprint is really unique. And a shoe that is not brand new is actually really unique as well, because everybody's footprint and everybody's gait, how your shoe wears, there's some people that drag their heel. There's some people that, walk
pronate or whatever.
Pronate and supinate, so how you walk in shoes that you've been wearing for a long time, and just the wear marks on your shoes can be really identifiable.
So that could be presented as evidence, like in a trial. Like, here's a shoe print.
Oh yeah.
All right. Now say I'm the bad guy. Okay. Say I'm the bad guy. I leave a footprint, but I throw away my shoes.
Okay.
Could they come to like my house, go in my closet, get a different pair of shoes and compare the tread pattern and have that hold up as evidence? Like what we were talking about. Cause like I drag my heel on the print left at the crime scene, and I obviously drag my heel on these shoes you got from my closet.
I would think they could probably, you know what? I don't know. I think a good defense lawyer would beat that up because, if it's not the exact same shoe.
Right.
And then in addition to that, you'd probably want to get DNA out of the shoe to actually.
Oh, that's true. So that's what happened to Ramirez. They had all these Avia size 11.5 sneaker prints, right? And then Feinstein goes and does a press conference and says, and the killer wears Avia sneakers size 11.5. And that night, Ramirez drops him off the Golden Gate Bridge. So the cops could never get him.
Yeah.
Which was a pain.
Yeah. But again, it's just one cog in the wheel. You gotta tie all those together, which is and this is one of the reasons that I respect detectives so much, because these guys, they're looking at a puzzle. They don't have the box to compare it to. And a lot of
It's a
times
great
they don't even
analogy.
have a picture on the puzzle pieces. They're just trying to put this puzzle together. And, a lot of the puzzles pieces are missing. And yet somehow they are persistent enough, and, they between their training and, their all the work that they put into it to contribute enough to, put the cogs of the wheel together and be able to fit all these puzzle pieces together, that they can actually create the story, recreate what happened based on, physical evidence and eyewitnesses and, all that kind of stuff. To be able to actually do that, all while you're dealing with the human and the emotional side of it, where,
Ugh.
you're dealing with the family that they're asking, why did this happen? They're asking, when are you going to solve it? All this pressure from the mayor and the city council and the chief of police. And, these guys are dealing with so many different, inputs from all these other sides. They have leads that they have to, they'll open up a hotline or a tip line, and they'll get thousands of leads. And, of course they're going to have a team. They don't all do it
Yeah,
themselves,
yeah,
but,
yeah.
there's still, they're putting together this puzzle, and they have to sift through all the crap and get rid of everything that isn't relevant, and put this puzzle together in a coherent way that is not only going to answer the question of, how and why and uh, everything, but it has to be in such a way that it's beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
And
You can convince 12 people that you're right.
right. And they doubt you anyway.
Of course.
In today's society,
yeah,
cops have less credibility than a lot of the, gangsters that are running around shooting people. It's like, yeah, these guys, what the modern day law enforcement goes through, to me, is, I mean, storming the beaches of Normandy level heroics.
I have a brother who's a New York State trooper, and he's just, man, it's every day.
Oh yeah,
it's every day from all sides. Yeah, all sides. And
talk to these guys all the time, and it's just absolutely, some of the things that they go through is just absolutely amazing. And in today's society, I just interviewed a retired lieutenant out of Las Vegas, and he has this organization called the Wounded Blue, and they help wounded and deceased officers and their families. And just one of the stories he was talking about is this guy that just pulled over this car and ended up getting literally executed. The guy shot at him, wounded him, and then literally walked up and put a bullet in him. And I don't care who you are. That's so far detached from humanity. I mean, yeah, that's right along the levels of evil that you're talking about. That 14-year-old that killed his mother.
Yeah,
it's just the inhumanity of some of the crimes that I've seen. I haven't personally been on the crime scene, but I've seen a lot of photos, and talked to a lot of these stories. And to me, it's amazing. In fact, this is probably right along the lines of, some of your podcasts. So I have a military background.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of I wouldn't say a military historian, but I love everything from Civil War battles, World War II battles. I love researching that kind of stuff. And it's pretty crazy the level of inhumanity that you can find in a war, and which is a big reason why, in wars, they even the Civil War, they didn't actually use people's names when they're talking about the group. They would talk about, they have nicknames for them, and it's everywhere from Nazi to, a nip to, Johnny Reb, you nickname
Krauts.
Yeah.
Right.
You assign these these pseudo names to the people because it dehumanizes them.
Yep.
And which is why a lot of these criminals modern day, they don't call them police officers. They don't call them law enforcement. They come up with all these names like, pigs and all the slurs that they have, but because it dehumanizes these officers. And
Wow.
in many ways that psychologically gives them more leeway to actually commit the crimes and they'll even do it to different groups. White guys are not white guys. They're not humans. They're
Yeah.
crackers,
Yeah.
these kind of things. And, using those kind of derogatory names,
it makes it easier to mistreat. It makes it easier to mistreat people.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And,
wow.
And the sad thing is the more we tolerate it, the worse it's going to get. And I think that's a big reason why you see so much violence. You see so much, just things that you're looking at them, you're going, how can you do that to another person?
Yeah. And you're talking about things that are, you're kind of almost trespassing onto like negotiation tactics, right? What people will say, like a kidnapper, make sure that the news always has pictures of the kid, right? Like, so what's happening. Like you're trying to humanize a victim so they don't do something bad to them. Like put the mother on TV all the time so the kidnapper sees them, right? Just to remind them of the human element that they're dealing with in case they've been able to dehumanize the person, So yeah, that's you're right on the money there with that.
Yeah, I think that psychological battle that people, do in their minds to justify what they do is a big problem with society. But anyway, it's just, again, we're into the abyss, and it can.
It's a dark and interesting place, though. Right?
Yeah, it really is, and it's like I said, go back to some of the episodes that I've done with Lee Miller, and
I will.
It's just one of those where you're just like, this guy. I'm glad there's guys like him out there, because most people, you get a victim that has just been totally mutilated, and you're like, why? I mean, especially if they're mutilated after they're dead. So you've killed this person, and this person, and a lot of times they know intimately their victim. The husband will kill the wife, kind of thing, or girlfriend. That happens a lot, and they don't just stop at murdering him. They don't just stop at killing him. They'll keep going.
Yep.
And you're like, what kind of psychological weird place that they end up in?
Right. They snap. They go to a different. Exactly. Yeah. They go to a different place. I saw a recent episode of yours you did with Detective Lindsay Wade.
Yeah. Yeah, she's awesome.
We're working on a project with Lindsay right now out of Seattle.
Are you really? Yeah.
Yeah. Me and my partner Carolyn. Yeah. Yeah. She's terrific.
Oh, she's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, her work with has she ever told you the story of how she got Ted Bundy's DNA in the database?
No. But that's what
you've got to ask her.
Yeah, I will.
She's one of the primary reasons that Ted Bundy's DNA ended up in the CODIS, the national DNA database.
Yeah. I'll make sure to ask her about that.
Yeah. Oh, she's awesome. Yeah, and her book, I've interviewed about her book as well, and some of the cases up there in Washington. Yeah, she's
really smart, no nonsense.
Yep.
Man,
she's
smart.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and really dedicated. It's like the kind of cops that you want out there. It's like a calling. She's honest and hardworking and just does everything the right way. Yeah, she's really impressive. Really impressive.
And sadly, I think most of society doesn't realize that she's exceptional, but she's also the norm.
I agree.
And out of the 800,000 cops that we have in sheriff deputies and, ICE, whoever, I think 99% of them are just good, wholesome, people that you literally my next door neighbor is a sergeant with an agency that's up in the Salt Lake area.
Mm-hmm.
Great guy. And I've got other neighbors that are around here that are cops, and you can't ask for better neighbors. And
I agree. I think I agree that the vast majority all doing it for the right reasons.
And yet, sadly, I interviewed a guy down in he's a LA cop,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, you know, this is especially during like the George Floyd area, and it's like there's no other profession in the world that is demonized and bunched together. So like one bad apple does something really stupid, and the entire profession is blamed for it. And you know, his example was, you know, doctors kill people all the time. Doctors will perform surgeries on the wrong limb. You know, they'll do something that's just really jacked up.
Yep.
And you know, they're not like serial killers. They don't do it on purpose.
Nope.
But they make mistakes. They're human.
Yep.
But
we don't demonize the medical. We don't demonize all surgeons.
Exactly. You know.
Yeah.
No, nobody says that. You know, all doctors are bad.
Right.
You know, it's just bizarre the way we treat law enforcement. And to me,
but I'll tell you, when you need a cop, you forget about all of those prejudices.
Yep.
Right away.
Oh, 100%.
Right away. Yep. Yep.
You don't care what their background is. You don't care what their race is. You want them to show up, and you want them to fix whatever problem you are having. You want them to show up and help you out with it. So
100%. I've had so many great experiences with police from where I've worked before and within my own family. And I've got really nothing but really good things to say. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Branden, let's, I want to remind the audience again, go check out your podcast, The Devil Within.
Devil Within. Thank you. Wherever you get your podcasts, people.
Yep, absolutely. So,
Jared, this has been such a treat. Thank you so much. And again, sorry if I took over, but I really was interested in your background.
Oh no, man. You know what? Discussions like this that go back and forth, those are the best discussions to have. So
beautiful. Well, I hope we get the chance to do it again one of these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. You take care. And if you ever need a MVAC witness or expert to come on one of your shows, man, I'm all over it.
Oh, don't worry. I hope you don't regret making that offer.
Oh, you know what?
I will take you up on it, sir.
Okay. Anytime, brother.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.